Hey, hi everybody. I'm Dazza Greenwood, and this is a demo of a new multi-agent system. And I just want to thank you all for your willingness to raise your hands when I put the call out to see who'd like to see and provide feedback on this. So, right. Um, I call this general approach to using LLM-based agents Agento, and it has one particular module that I call GenSpring, and it's really about unlocking autonomous innovation to go from ideas to reality. So the question is, what if agents could continuously generate breakthrough ideas and autonomously develop them into real solutions? So what I've created is a system that does that in a prototype way. And it does it through three key innovations. The first one is encapsulating the core capabilities into modules. So the modular architecture enables more rapid experimentation and better integration with new and different technologies without tanking the whole system. It also has some other interesting benefits that I'll get into in a couple of slides. The second major, I think, advance is a more sophisticated approach to AI agent collaboration. And it enables deeper reasoning and more effective handling of complex challenges and ways to adapt to them. I'll show you that as well. And the third one, which may be most exciting, I sort of foreshadowed it on the first slide, I call GenSpring, and that's the idea engine, the part that's continuously generating and evaluating and then feeding promising potential ideas for new innovations directly into development. So let's start by taking by the modular. Let me unpack a little more about the modular design. So it is about flexibility, as I mentioned, to be able to use different tools and frameworks, and there are quite a few agent frameworks out there. AutoGen, I like LangGraph, which is part of LangChain. I've implemented some modules in, and there's any number of others as well. And it's helpful for that to be able to kind of hot swap different frameworks in. But it's not just about the flexibility. What I noticed as I started more modularizing certain core components of the system was that it was also really helpful from collaboration with other teams and people that are also working on agent systems. So I think it may provide a new approach for more open and interoperable innovation. So the way I've got this set up is each module accepts kind of structured inputs and it exports structured outputs. They're in JSON. And there may be other files kind of attached and linked to. And this creates a kind of clear interface to allow the different modules to plug and play with their preferred approaches. And that means it allows not just me to do that, but me to do that with other teams in other companies or in labs, which is kind of cool. So this means we can more rapidly experiment with different technologies and frameworks or entirely new and different approaches to building any aspect of the agent system. And I'll just say on one other note of context, this is particularly important now because there's a lot of people talking about and people that are working on agent systems, LLM-based agent systems. And there's a lot of different approaches and ideas about how to do it, and different people with new tools and so forth. And there's a real question about, what the impact of those are. Being able to have people try their approach within a module and actually see apples to apples. Is it better? Is it worse? Is it different? Has been a game changer. And this is where it gets interesting because it opens the door to a world where any team that believes they have a better approach can basically prove it by implementing it as part of a chain with other systems that aren't changing, and we could see is it better or how is it different? So this modular thing has been helpful on a practical level as I've been building the system out, but I think it's also potentially a good direction to go with aspects of agent systems. Now, what I'm doing in my modules, and the reason I started building this system was because I have a particular belief that I've been demonstrating, I think, which is that LLMs are capable of doing very, very deep work, and capable of achieving um, goals that are complex and that that go beyond what's possible with a chat interface. And the way that that I would do that when I was using LLMs as part of client work, for example, or other innovation, for example, like in a research lab setting, is I just have these sort of patterns that I would be using a couple of years ago, and I'd have these scripts where I would kind of copy and paste my prompts a lot. And sometimes I would start by having them summarize something and then break it into smaller parts and then start to work on each part. And so I'd have these kind of like design patterns, you could say, that would go over many, many sessions, sometimes with multiple models. I'm sure everybody's familiar with this at this point in 2025. What I started to realize, however, was it was still a little laborious going through these things and copying and pasting. So of course I started scripting it. And that was helpful. Things like GPTs came out and other modules. The main insight here was I realized that what was making this really good, in addition to the raw power and capability of the LLMs, which is tremendous, was the better I got at prompting and the more thoughtful, the much better the outcomes were. And some of the wisdom, if you will, or some of the effectiveness of the prompts came in knowing like what questions to ask when or which design patterns to apply when. And I had criteria for this. I started writing that down and I encapsulated it in more prompts so that an LLM could take my role as the one who was choosing what sets of prompts and what design patterns to use with LLMs and do it itself. Oh, here's Diana. I'm going to let her in. Good. So basically what this means, just at a high level, I should really just read the script, but I want to tell you the story first, is that I've taken the process of facilitating LLMs to do deep work and encapsulated it with an LLM, and I call it an agent. So it's kind of a facilitator agent that can direct and collaborate with, sometimes debate with, instruct, evaluate, all the things I would do with other LLMs. So what makes the system unique is how you could call that it orchestrates these conversations and these design patterns of conversations in ways that mirror successful human AI collaboration patterns. So the agents can kind of guide each other back to relevant topics, which is key when you have agent systems. They drift sometimes. It can seek revisions, and it can stick with those revisions right through to the end. And it can ensure certain kinds of quality benchmarks through different evals and success criteria, among other things. And unlocking deeper verbose conversations that are on tracks, based on the way I've encoded the design patterns for them to follow, has really raised the ceiling of of the types of deliverables these systems are capable of. They're great at talking, so I want to let them run. I want to let them gallop and talk, but facilitate it. And some of this is more of an art than a science. And there's a balance between how do you how specific do you get by telling them how to collaborate with another LLM versus how general. I'll just say up front, this is a general system. So I've built this system to take any initial goal and to put it through a bunch of modules and create a deliverable. So it's not domain specific. It's completely general in purpose. And that required a higher level of almost like meta prompting in order to tell it the sorts of things to look for and how to stay on track. I can show you that code. Now we come to the thing I've been promising you from the start, which is I finally realized maybe half a year ago, that one of the how do I put it? Like one of the choke points for this was every time I ran the system, I had to start with an idea or a goal, and then test the system. So I would do this, 50 times a day sometimes on high iteration days, and I was running out of goals. I'm pretty creative, but I was kind of recycling the goals, but I didn't want to repeat the goal every time unless I was doing an apples to apples test. And so I started, of course, using LLMs to help me come up with the initial goal to run through the system and have the LLMs collaborate on figuring out how to achieve the goal and then starting to develop toward it. What I realized was when I prompted it well enough, the LLMs were coming up with better goals than I was. And this was very, very interesting to me, better ideas. So I started encapsulating that into its own module, which I call GenSpring. And that's where that is. So imagine having access to a kind of perpetual wellspring of innovative ideas, and within a component that can sort of self-evaluate the novelty and the usefulness and the feasibility of the ideas, and then kind of, rate and rank them accordingly so that it just pops out the very best ideas. And imagine further having those few very best ideas then pipe right in to the other modules I just showed that I'm about to show you, which can then start to turn it into a plan and into deliverables. That would be pretty cool. That could be kind of like the equivalent of having to spend a lot of money on a private research lab. And ideation is critical to innovation and to design. So that's GenSpring. The implications are, I think, relatively profound. And why don't we get right into now actually showing you an example. Before I do that, can I just ask, are there any kind of questions or, I don't know, complaints or anything that anyone wants to say before I kind of crack open the system?
Yeah, you just exploded my brain with LLMs coming up with ideas.
Yeah,
I can talk more about that at some other point, but that is I'm hanging on to every word now.
I'm so glad. Anything else? Okay. Um, all right. So here's, you don't have to answer if you don't want to. I have some backup goals, but does anybody have a goal you want me to try to put in to the system? I want to just first show you the Agento system, where it starts with a goal and then does the things I said in a modular way in the deep collaboration. He's not with us right now, but a collaborator named Brian Wilson, who's a good guy. I kind of did a prep demo for this with him a couple of days ago, and he told me a goal that he was working on for this kind of print machine. There's like automatic print services that you can send your PDF to, and they'll give you a book. So he has an idea for a kind of a continuous printmaking process where people can turn their things into books, and he has ideas about community. So he basically told me what his idea was. I put it into this file and ran it through the system. So we can use this as a backup, but if anyone can think of something, it could be anything. This is general purpose. Could be like, I need to figure out my, change my workout routine, or I want to build a new piece of hardware or anything.
Yeah, I put something in the chat because I was messing with ChatGPT the other day and I said, how can I buy enough bottles of water and ship them to LA to help the fire service out there? And it struggled and it kept telling me that I was better off donating money to the fire service. But then I like bent it and bent it and bent it, and it finally told me that I needed to hire a tanker and send fresh water in a tank. Anyway, it was like I just gave it this problem, and it took me about 30 minutes to get it off its trail. Anyway, that was just a very random idea.
Okay. Hopefully y'all can see my screen. So we've got line 6 and line 8. How can we ship more water to Los Angeles? And I think we probably should add a little context if it's because they may not be aware that there's historic fires now. All right, it's time of this historic wildfires, I guess you call it. Fires tearing through the city. And then there's another option. How can we use?
You had an extra E in wildfires. Probably doesn't matter, but
Oh, thanks. Oh, it's Oscar Wilde's fires.
ah,
You read his stuff? He's on fire. What is dumb question? What's LOW? Is that a kind of wide area network? LOWAN?
Yeah, so low end is like when people have their Bluetooth services connected and they're in local areas together, you can coordinate if you ever lose, let's say, internet connectivity or things of that nature. So in times of disaster recovery, how can agents utilizing these networks begin to coordinate evacuation, so that we don't have loss of life, loss of property, congestion, all of these things.
Got it. Okay. So first of all, thank you both. I don't know if I usually don't collaborate with either of you, so I just want to commend you both for just showing up and giving ideas. But let's kind of put it to a vote. I suppose like this. Do people feel strongly about it, either one of these? Just come off mute and say so.
I'm not hung up on the water one. I think the other one is actually a better subject area.
I think that's a really interesting one. The number 6.
Okay. So this is how I do it. So there's different ways to do it. I've got a version where you type it into the terminal, but I kind of prefer being able to be in a text document and fiddle around with it till it's just right. By the way, it can be quite long. Like it can be several paragraphs long, although you pay for it with the tokens on the back end. Okay, so here's the goal. Just close that. And you'll soon see it basically goes and ingests that goal and puts it through a process. Here we go. Generating plan structure. I'll just crack it open to show you exactly what's happening as soon as it's done. This would be a terrible time for it to stop working. Oh, good. There we go. It usually doesn't take that long. Terrifying. 26. So this, I promised you structured data. This is structured data. So basically, this is just taking the goal and decomposing it into a bit of a plan. And there was some back and forth between some agents to do this, but in these files, as I move it through many different modules, I always maintain the exact words that the user started with or the GenSpring, but whatever the initial goal was, and then I continuously refer back to that for context, and that's just a pro tip there. So this says we've got a 7-step process, okay? Requirements gathering and system design. So what are the evac needs, comms, listen, basic stuff, hardware selection and development, the appropriate LORAWAN, is that? I don't know this area, so I'm not sure if that's a legit acronym or not.
It is.
Okay, for swarm agents again. Low-RAN network deployment and config. I would expect to see something about, dealing with the intense conditions in the field, because that's like a whole different deployment nightmare. Local area integration, swarm algorithm development, system testing and validation. I guess it could come up here. Performance. So now the other two things, I don't know, those are, I would call those like milk toast. Like they're like, okay, I guess they're plausible. You might know better. You would know better than about how to evaluate this than me, Zachary. It's not an area I know much of anything about hardly. But I'd say this isn't bad. And one of the things you can do for like mere pennies is run this through several different times and sort of, select the best kind of the best of the best, and then finalize it that way. But this is okay to start with. The other thing you can do, although what I'm really fascinated by is, and where almost all my attention is fully autonomous processes. But in reality, the current state of deployment is people want a lot of human in the loop. That's totally fine. So at this point in a more of a workaday agent scenario, I would show a screen to the user and be like, why don't you fiddle with this? And then you could go through and add step 8, or you could change step 6 to, actually, I'll just go ahead and do it since I've got the thing open. This must include testing in, what do you call it, Brian? Oh, Brian's off. Brian does a lot of emergency response stuff, like in hostile, not hostile, in dangerous, chaotic, right? Chaotic emergency environments where there's like no electricity and there's whatever firestorms, right?
Were you looking for
I,
HADR, humanitarian assistance, disaster relief?
Say again?
Were you looking for the term HADR, humanitarian assistance, disaster relief?
HADR environments, is that okay? I'm just going to add that in there. And one of the things I showed Brian is little tweaks at this initial phase of the process have huge impacts the more module it goes through, because as I'll show you, it like obsesses over every word through the evals process and the iterations and everything. And so a little bit of human, in the loop here goes a long way if you have a goal and you're driving the Agento system. When it's an autonomous process that's driving the system, I have other agents go and eval it and kind of get it just right. But anyway, here's something that's kind of standard and it's good enough to show you the rest of the system. Just two other quick pro tips. I kind of have it generate 2 different types of evals. One of them is evaluation criteria that's to be used when it's iterating on the plan from this initial outline of a plan, because that's critical. Like, how do you know whether something's better or worse? And so this is really, really important just for the Agento process to have. And then the other one that I think is critical, which I love, just one sec, Cam, is success criteria. So let's say you like assume that you've got the best plan ever. How are we going to know if this network swarm is performing well? Like, like what are the success measures in deployment? And you want to know that up front, because you may want to build in the creation and preservation and use of the right data to apply those success measures while you're building the system, not as an afterthought, right? And just knowing what success looks like as you're going through is critical. So I also have it come up with success measures for like post-deployment of whatever the idea is. And then each of these gets filtered in many different ways throughout the whole process. Gam, you had your hand up, I think.
so I was trying to think of something, because what I saw there was a reasonably, software development lifecycle sequence of steps. I was curious as to how it would work with something else, but then when you said add another step in, this is if you can do this, it'll be really important. I've added it into the chat, is how you like counter bias, how you mitigate for bias in the system, because if you can build an agent that will detect where bias might occur in a system, that will be just so valuable.
Agreed. And I would love to follow up with you on to do that, but just for the purposes of this moment, I just kind of want to hit and run because it's already 2:33. So, but yeah, we're having the same conversation right now, that you're looking at it and thinking like, wouldn't it be amazing to have, to be able to add steps and so forth? Like, that's exactly the right thinking. And I'd be happy to go through this with you again later and like really dig into it if you'd like. So what I've just done now is I've just gone through the second module. The second module is one that builds out the plan based on the original user goal in this case, and the what the steps are, and looking at the evaluation criteria and the success metrics. And I've got a series of different agents that kind of go through and do a lot of interesting conversations to sort of build that out. And then step by step, it goes through. So in this particular one, I give it a bit of a persona as a top consultant. That sometimes helps. It's not always the right one. Again, it's great to have a modular approach where you can use different abstractions and approaches to this stuff. But I basically tell it, here is the goal, here is the step, here's the overall plan. Go ahead and draft step one. Like that's fundamentally what it is. This is not that a lot of agent systems do this kind of thing, where you just go step by step and build it out. And now we're getting it coming back from OpenAI in this case, and it's building out that first step, evac needs, comms requirements. So you see, it's just sort of like opening up each one of those little bullet points a little bit. Step 2, hardware selection development. Got a relatively chunky prompt there, so it knows everything it needs. And here we have, I have no idea if these are good. This is, by the way, where I would also add in like a Perplexity search or a Google search to go out there and do some stuff, or some, like, giving it tools is really critical. This one doesn't have tools because it's just for a demo, but you'll have to tell me whether SX1276 is any good or not. But anyway, it goes through blah, 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 and it kind of builds it all out. It's on the way toward building it out now. Let me show you quickly what one looks like that's kind of all done and dusted. Well, actually, let me let this finish so I can have it do revision first. Deployment and training. Yeah. Okay, yeah, I'll talk more about this. So okay, we're already at step 7. So here you go. I have it. This isn't critical to the demo or anything, but just FYI for those of you doing LLM stuff or agent systems, the silently consider to yourself play is really good for criteria for 2 reasons. Number one, it won't then add that to the text of its output, if you know what I mean. So if you want to consider something, but you don't want it to repeat the success criteria in step 7, which you do not want it to do, silently is good. The other thing is, it actually, I need to see more research on this, but I'm seeing reasoning research lately that shows the activations, like in latent space, are really good when it silently considers. It does like some kind of deep cyber equivalent to reasoning. So I think there's, whatever it's worth, I've also noted that I'm getting better performance when I put different criteria and stuff that it should do before performing an action when I say silently consider. But then at the end, I give an instruction, don't silently consider, write out step 7 in this format, like that's an instruction. And then it writes out step 7, and then, God, I hope we're done. No, we're not done. Oh, I'm sorry. And then in this module, I kind of glom things together for today. So I also have it go through, once it has generated the steps for everything, I'm having it go through and generate revision requests. So inevitably, when it does the first draft of something, when you look back to the original user goal and the original outline, and you may have noticed, like the outline included some fairly chunky things like deploy and config, infrastructure to provide, establish secure communication channels and routing mechanisms. When you unfold that, that could be like, 10, 15, 20 different items. And in the first draft of these systems, just based on, its capacity within a single, kind of like inference session, they're sometimes prone to miss a few steps or to not do it perfectly, of course. So these revision requests are critical. And I basically have another LLM with an agent role as judge and evaluator go through, look at the goal, look at the instruction, look at the output, and then redline it like a very strict, like evaluator, like, oh, this is good, but you missed this part. You didn't quite capture that part right. And then I have it turn it into specific revision requests step by step. Please be over. Yes, good. And so here's just an example of what that looks like in this case. La, 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 la. So again, we retained the original goal. Now we've got each of the steps kind of built out. And here's all the revision requests for each step. So we can just take a quick glance at this. requirements gathering. This is just for like a paragraph break and a line break, just to make it a string. Time constraints, landslide fire, etc. Hardware selection. So anyway, so it's come up with its best guess of a first draft. It's not even topped off by RAG or by search or anything, just its latent knowledge, just to show you kind of how it works. And so I can't evaluate most of these myself, but I don't know, it looks plausible, I guess. But just to kind of show you after step 7, so for step 1, the revision request is, in the requirements gathering section, it would be helpful to explicitly mention using low-RAN services and local networks with which the user's original goal highlights. Good, perfect. So part of how I stress the evaluator is always look back at exactly word for word what the user said and keep fidelity to it. Make sure that if we did this plan, we will then therefore have achieved the goal of the user. And that's just an endless source of inspiration. And it ends up being really helpful kind of instruction to give the LLMs. It has other instructions as well, addressing specific needs. So you'll see it's actually got 7 different revision requests for step 1. Several revision requests for step 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which brings us to the real power of the system. When you put it, I'm just going to open up the next one and let it run, and then show you a finished example, and then I'll pop back in to show you how it finished this swarm thing at the end, because it takes a little while to run this code. But now I have this other system which kind of shows the basic life cycle of this, which goes through and takes each revision request, and I have multiple agents in different roles that collaborate, and sometimes one becomes a ruthless taskmaster, kind of whipping the other agent to apply every single one of the revision requests and do it at a high level of quality. And it's hilarious to watch these things go back and forth in these verbose conversations sometimes. And they are, pleasant. Like they have, I shouldn't say taskmaster, like as you know, they're all like reinforcement trained to be pleasant, upbeat kind of entities. So they're not like mean or anything, but they are relentless in making sure every last one of these things is done to a high level of quality. So I will show you that. Yes. Okay. So let's just let this cook in the background and let me show you this beautifulness. So do you remember how I told you my friend Brian had this printmaking machine idea, which we ran through a couple days ago? So we ran it through and there was a bunch of revision requests. So I took the equivalent file for Brian. Here it is. I'll just show you exactly what I fed into the revision requests. Here's a markdown version. I have it output JSON and markdown, so you can have a human readable and machine readable. I only kind of care about the machine readable one, but sometimes I want to look at it. And so here's the revision request for that one. Selecting open source textbook repository, recommended revisions. These are substantive. Print provider integration, substantive. So this was the revision request part. And then it went back through and repeats the success measures and so forth so that they're tailored. So I ran that through this module where it applies the revisions, and this is what gorgeous things happen, and they always happen. So yellow is what's happening in the process, green is what's happening substantively. Load the project plan, extract the revision requests, just standard JSON, no problem. And now just get to work. Okay, let's do revision request number 1. This was the revision request. And so in this case, I had Claude as the evaluator and the taskmaster and Gemini as the worker. So Claude, the first thing I have it do is take the revision request, and my instruction to Claude as the evaluator agent is form a prompt to Gemini that tells Gemini, hey, Gemini, like you're on a new project. You're going to apply these revision requests to this step of this plan in order to meet that user goal according to these evaluation criteria. That's basically what it does. And then it forms a prompt to Gemini, and then it sends Gemini the request where it history 0. This is like the first interaction. Sometimes it takes several interactions for them to get these right. And it says to Gemini, please provide. Oh, and then Gemini totally chokes, which happens all the time with these things, which is why I've done it this way. He's like, oh yeah, could you give me the text? And I'd be happy to do that. You totally did give them the text. I checked the logs. And then look at what Claude does. Instead of the system having a halting state, then Claude receives it. And the verdict is no, you did not successfully implement the revision request. Why? Because you just asked me for the stuff, but I gave it to you. And so what is the root cause of the issue? You need to actually look at the content, and you should incorporate these steps, et cetera, et cetera. And so then once it's diagnosed that, it then composes another message back to Gemini in round 2 of the conversation, telling what to do. And it's saying, like, revise the original content. What we need is a complete revision, and follow this. Oh, I'm sorry, it's here. Start with, yeah, it goes here, and then it spells it out. Start with like this section, include these points, et cetera, et cetera. Conclude with, here's the format. Sends that to Gemini. Now we're at item 2, and Gemini's revision now is much better. Like, it actually did the thing, not completely, but pretty good. So here we have like section 1. This phase involves whatever, blah, blah, blah. Verdict for this one, yes, this revision meets all requirements and is ready for handoff. That was unusually fast. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 sessions because it kind of half-asses it or does some things not quite right. So now that we've got, oh, and then it has this, like, I have it be very verbose about why it thinks it was good, because sometimes upon review, it was too easy of a grader and it did miss some things. So I just want to keep a record of all this. The revision's complete. So what do we do when the revision's complete? We go to the next step and like do the whole damn thing again on step 2, and then step 3 and step 4. So this is interesting. So it kind of comes up with this thing for the community incentives, which is part of what Brian said he wanted. Sent it to Gemini. Gemini says, Gemini said some stuff here, and it kind of did some of the things, but not all of the things. So the verdict is no. The revision needs several adjustments to fully meet the requirements of the original request, missing the API integration, which we specifically put in the thing, incomplete pricing structure, service spec gaps, et cetera, some recommended additions. You see how good it is when you let them be verbose and you prompt them right? They really get into, how do we achieve the user's goal, or how do we, whatever, get deep into this thing. So part of the idea of this second innovation of letting the stallions gallop is leaning into what they're good at and facilitating them to do it well in a nice design pattern. So this goes back and forth a little bit, and then eventually we do get the pricing options here. We get the community pricing, some good stuff like that. We get the incentive structures, the stuff that he'd missed. And now verdict, yes, this revision's complete and ready. Okay. And the reasons why. What do we do now? We go to the next one and the next one and the next one. And then, finally, you can see this is quite long because that's what it takes. And so at the end, we've got a verdict yes on the final point, and then it saves it out as the revised plan. So let's take a look at ours. Okay, it's still going. It takes a little while. Oh God, they're on step 4. But sometimes if it hasn't got it right after 4 rounds, it's not good. Oh, I'm sorry, we're at step 5, but we're round 4. Retain without changes. Seems to have some real issues with the batteries. Error detection. Anyway, it's doing the same level of rigor for your idea about, the swarm thing for emergencies. Low rel algorithm. Well, actually, we can take a look at this more deeply if we want to. Oh, it got it right. Okay. Cool. Anyway, Yeah, here you can see this first verdict is no, the dynamic route planning and swarm agent integration is significantly improved. However, there's one remaining requirement you did not hit. There's obstacle avoidance, which does come up with swarms, obviously, and collision detection and all that stuff. And so explain the process for detecting shared obstacles. Oh, this is more like a feature, like a mountain or a burning car or something, I guess. Environmental disasters, real-time obstacles, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. Like you can imagine the context from just looking at this little point that they're obsessing over some twig on the branch on the tree of revision requests, which is exactly what I want them to do, no matter what the goal is. So anyway, I've well, that's just going to kind of churn away, and that's like a quick glimpse at the Agento system. And the Agento system, like the three main ideas are we should modularize things. And so I have a module for decomposing the plan, and the input is just what the goal was for the plan, and then making sure it's actionable and making sure we have the right stuff to do a good job, like evaluation criteria for iterations and success metrics and a few other things. Standard JSON at that point. So there's like an air gap between that and anything else that happens ever, which is great for the module. Then another thing ingests that and it does whatever's needed. And actually sometimes, well, let's just say for this kind of thing, I've got something that basically takes that and builds it out into a proper plan. Okay, so we have a first draft of a plan that can be executed, and then it outputs JSON. In this case, I actually glommed another module onto that too for quickness, which is revision requests. And 80% of the game is doing the revision requests right and iterating and iterating and iterating. So the revision requests, and then one that takes the revision air gap, standard JSON in and out. Now we have a module that just knows how to do revision requests and make sure those revision requests work really well. And that outputs another version. And then, I've got other modules I've been working on that do code generation, that do, publishing stuff, that do, it's like, depending on what kind of expertise you need, you can have like a little bit of routing to go to the right module at the right time. I'm just kind of showing you like one throughput all the way through. Modular design is key. That's the first big insight here for where I think agents ought to be going and what I'm going to be doing and trying to encourage people to build their own modules and play. The second thing is, let these champions sprint. What are the LLMs good at? They're good at talking and thinking. So let them think and let them talk a lot and make sure that you're asking the right questions of them so that they know what's relevant in order to do that task at that time and kind of give them the right roles to get super verbose, super deep, super high quality. And that I showed you a little bit of that in the revision request thing with all those conversations and the verdicts and the back and forth. So like that's huge. And some of that is get out of my mind what I do when I'm doing a good job prompting and encapsulate it into an agent that's doing a good job working with other agents, and getting them to do good stuff. And that's, I think, extrapolatable to other domains and job functions as well. And then the final thing is we could start the whole damn thing with LLMs coming up with the ideas that pump it through this autonomous system that gets, toward results. And that's called GenSpring, which I don't think there's enough time to show you that one, but it's pretty good. So there you have it, Agento and GenSpring. Thank you very much for your quality of your attention, and especially for stepping forward to provide some ideas so that we could demo the system. I'll check back. Oh, it's done. I'm sorry. So before we finish, let me just show you the final, who knows what, masterpiece or not. Ooh, this is bad. So it ultimately wasn't able to do step 7's revisions. They were too complicated. Some of this is that I have it time out after 5 back and forths. But there's ways around that. But let's just take a quick peek and see what we got. Do you want to see it in JSON or Markdown?
Markdown.
Oh, damn it. Okay. I like JSON, but fine. Here's Markdown. Your JSON, you can see everything. The LoRaWAN-based swarm agent evacuation system, overall summary, detailed outline, requirements gathering. Actually, we're going to do this. Let's make it super gorgeous. Overall summary. Requirements gathering, evac needs, comms requirements, system constraints, power consumption. Look, where do you get energy in the middle of a disaster? So I would like to see somewhere. Comms protocols for feasibility analysis, hardware selection. They keep talking about these. I don't know what these are, honestly. Conclusion. Network deployment and config. Okay, screwed up here a little bit. So it's the revisions. The taskmaster is supposed to make sure stuff like this never appears to the end user, but you know, whatever. It's a little not slightly imperfect. Ooh, 3.1, 3.2, 3.3 security. So we're getting detailed here. This is a new section. Network, so local network integration for disaster resilience. Interesting. Okay, backup, mobile apps, cross-network communication. Those protocols are probably a nightmare just to auth into the local team. Swarm algorithm development, dynamic. Oh, here we go. So apparently it did work out finally, the dynamic, the obstacle avoidance rather. That's nice, I guess. System testing and validation. Oh, did it do the thing I told it? What did I tell it? I told it to do something with system testing. Can't even remember what I said anymore. Anyway, you can check it. I'm sure it did because it doesn't forget anything and it obsesses over finishing everything the user said. Deployment and training. And so there you have it, Zachary. Your idea come to life, at least in a kind of like in an initial way with like a plan that can show you something. This one, of course, thank you. This one obviously is like not something an LLM can go and like, you know, source all the parts and like create a swarm of stuff. So like some of these things cannot be completely autonomously finished. A ton of them can. Like if it's sort of like we need a mobile app to do something, this whole damn thing can be like done and deployed. And then you could have ones that operate it, you know, and do the DevOps and so forth. In theory, you know, this is a little bit over the horizon still, not very far over the horizon to have continuous, perpetual, gorgeous, autonomous innovation. Thank you very much for coming to my Davos talk.
That's amazing. One quick thought. If I sent that plan to my boss, the first thing he would say is, "You need a diagram. Can you generate diagrams?"
Totally. Yeah. I've got a lot of, so my go-to diagram is using Mermaid, which displays well in any Markdown reader or many Markdown readers. So I have it do Mermaid, but I've also got an API where some of these image generators are getting better and better at doing like Gantt charts when they're topped off in different ways. So I'm experimenting with that. So it can do it. I will say this is one of those many areas that I'm not that good at it, and I barely know when it's a good diagram or bad diagram. I'm just notorious for that. And so this is another one of those places where modules are great. Some teams like that, that's what they do. That's their niche industry. We're diagram geniuses. They should go ahead and make a module for that. And then you could just pop it right in, and there could be competitive modules. You know, someone in Raytheon or in BBN may be good at modules. So like then they have a module with standard input and output, and you can start doing things at the speed of thought instead of, you know, 6, you know, quarters at a time for turnaround with defense contractors, which is frequently like the speed of innovation out here in the rest of the world.
Pop it into your system as a goal.
Come again?
Pop it into your system as a goal. I need to express all of my output as graphical charts in Three.js.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so right now, mine wouldn't do a good job achieving that goal other than Mermaid documents. But by then building on a module that does exactly that, like in Cursor for 3 or 4 concerted days, it can totally do that. And then one of the agents I've got is starting to do routing to like the right module for the job. So depending on what the requirements are, like, do we have a module or a set of tool use that does diagrams? We totally do. What's the best one? Evaluate it, argue about it, select one, route it, and we're done and dusted. We've got diagrams.
Yeah. And then break it down in a CSV with charts for my boss report.
Right. Bob, I saw you sort of had your hand up or something.
I do have, like, what's the long game proposition you have in your mind, Oz? Is it creating like mastering techniques for the common good, or is there a product that's in the future with IP and all the trappings? And how does that relate to what you're the context of your talk at Davos?
Yeah, thanks. Great question. So the first and foremost, this is arguably somewhat selfless. I mean, it's a little bit self-aggrandizing, showing like, oh, look what I came up with, but it's really like just letting people letting people have the ideas and getting it out there into the open. So it's, I think there's a few good things. I've been sitting on this for several months now, but haven't been willing to pull the trigger quite yet. So Davos is a little bit of an artificial forcing function to just like get it out of my head, get it off my terminal, and like, out into the world where it can have some good conversations. Two outcomes that I hope happen from that. One of them is I want people to play with me. I want people to come up with modules. And I was thinking of doing like a hackathon or doing some other stuff where, we start the day with generating good ideas, and then everybody in agents thinks they're the best at agents. I don't think I'm the best, other than me maybe, but everyone, like every other post I see in every framework is like, we do plan creation like geniuses, and we can do code dev like, gurus. Great. Like, here's a standard JSON input, do it. Show me your output, and at the end of the day, we'll see who came up with the best stuff or what combinations of different people's stuff. So I want people to play. And then the third thing is, I wouldn't mind if there were companies or whoever, or governments or someone out there, or research teams that wanted to, go deeper in any of these ideas, that wanted to, bring me on board as a consultant, like through civics.com. That's what I do all day. And I would love to kind of show people, here's how to do this, and kind of get into their environment and domain and work with them and let them implement this in a good way. Could there be a startup down the road? There could. I think I need like it's co-founders that are startup people for that sort of thing. So so those are sort of the three kind of like objectives I have in order.
Nice.
Thank you.
Oh, I have a
Diana?
question. Hi, and good to see you, Bob. Well, yeah, sorry I'm eating lunch, but I'm sorry I missed the beginning. I had another meeting, but I was wondering if you think there is a value to using non-generative AI in parts of this to have like elements that are more deterministic mixed in, or should it be, I think currently, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's like Gen AI all the way, right?
You're
In
right.
terms yeah.
So you're right, and you're right. Number one, you're right. Yes, it would be helpful. Thanks, Cam. It's great to meet you. Feel free to follow up, and I'd be happy to fiddle with it along the lines that you said about adding a new thing or doing other stuff. And thank you for joining us and for participating.
Cheers.
Thanks. Bye. You're right, Diana. Are you still there? Oh, there you are. There is no deterministic element per se in this, and you're also right that it would be beneficial. One of the things, for example, the diagram making that Brian was mentioning would be a really good example. Like there's a bunch of things where like some my IDEO friends have shown me, like when they do spec things out in a certain way, so they have everything that's needed, they kind of hit a button and it kind of like sends part of it to Photoshop and to Illustrator and to like some like design spec thing, and like kind of like pop stuff out for stuff that they're doing all the time. So like I think there's a lot of stuff also with Brian's idea to have like an autonomous printmaker. A lot of that stuff is very mechanistic and robot process automation or whatever. It kind of stuff would be perfect for it. So it kind of depends on the thing. Broadly in agent speak, I would call that tool use. Usually tool use is sort of like giving an agent like an API it can call, but it could also be like triggering a process with some software that you have. So that's known as tool use. And it's just another function that you call in the system. And that kind of stuff would be very, very handy. The more tools and capabilities these things have, the more they can do. And then all you have to do, but like what you have to do is then make sure you sort of designed these orchestrator agents to ask the right questions again, such as, is this the kind of thing that needs a tool? Yes or no? Yes. Here's our catalog of available tools. Are any of these tools suitable? Yes or no? Oh yeah, we have like 4 diagram tools. Look at the spec sheet for the diagram, ingest it, pose the question, would any of these specifications meet the requirements for doing this kind of diagram that Brian wants? Yes, this one. Okay, then therefore route to that one. So we have some LLMs figuring out what tools are good or what mechanistic processes are good, and then you send it to it with the right format, and then it has an output. And guess what? That output becomes part of an input to stitch the whole thing together in a final deliverable. So yeah, you're totally right. Mechanistic things are critical. I've been focusing just more on the cerebral part, which is like how would I know when to use a tool? And how do I know what I'm doing to start with, if you know what I mean? And I think LLMs have a huge ceiling of cognitive capability, and we're just nipping at the heels and the ankles of how much these things can think and how good they can talk and the great things they can do. So this is more focused on that, but once it gets sorted out, the more tools, the better.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Daza, what do you know about your audience at Davos?
0. I've never been. No idea. I've got no idea. Maybe no one. I mean, this is like I don't know if anyone's going to show up.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
No. But I'm kind of hoping to have like a lot of little things like this with like, like a small group of like cool people with good ideas who are engaging, and just to have some smaller conversations, perhaps.
Marta's going to be there, my GC.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
You know, one idea I had that came from the idea that you just worked through is the housing crisis in LA. And is there a way to use tools like this to help find creative solutions to affordable housing for tens of thousands of people who, and when I say affordable housing, in an LA context, right?
Yeah.
But there's all the price gouging going on right now on rental properties and things like that. That would kind of be a cool scenario to play out.
That really would. And that reminds me of I saw something from you, Diana, this morning when I was going through my notifications. It was excuse me, I don't know what it's called, some Facebook thing that's like a story or something. And you were talking about the resilience and the willingness of people to like get together as a barn raising to help people in LA, if I remember
Oh,
correctly.
yeah. Yeah.
So that would be right in sync with that mindset. Yeah, I mean, if you want to write up like the idea, like as a sentence, even, you know, all I have to do is hit click, just go click, and it like does all of the stuff, and we can kind of see what it comes up with, and can run it 2 or 3 times to see if even if there's just like a few good ideas in there, even if it doesn't come up with like the final, like ultimate solution, to how to do such a thing, I still think it's pretty useful. And it could be great for like there's like this like this huge challenge in crisis situations of how to prioritize and allocate resources, and we have this sort of huge waste of like all like even here near my place in Oakland, somebody had their idea to have like a clothing and food and like relief supplies thing for LA, and they had like 2 trucks that were huge trucks that were ready to go, and they had to get 2 more trucks, and they still had like 2 or 3 trucks of stuff that they couldn't send to LA because too many people came out. And so they're figuring out how to deliver them to local like shelters and people in need in the Bay Area. That's just like so typical. And when it got to LA, how much of that stuff didn't hit its target? So like some way to allocate and match resources is so important and timely, and it's never going to be out of style.
Right. I may send you a couple sentences. I'm going to do a little poking and research. I'd be curious to see that.